Thank you, everybody, for joining us, taking some time out of your day to hear us talk about the CFL here on CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, football talk as well. Joining me is David Morassutti. David, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. How are you doing, Frank?
I'm good. I can't complain. It's been an interesting week if you're a CFL fan. You know, the anti-Argos spoke up, and it was an easy argument to make that it didn't make sense for Chad Kelly to be with the team at this time when it appears, I say appears because you have to take people at their word, right? From what we're hearing, that they have, corroborated evidence that there were things done that contravened the agreement the Players Association, on behalf of the players, has with the league. So now the Argos, in their infinite wisdom, have decided to suspend Chad from practice. Do I have that right?
Well, essentially, the Argos are not. They're basically saying Chad is not going to be participating in training camp. He's not even at the facility after he appeared in the mini camp. So, at the Argos' discretion, I guess they're not constituting it as a suspension, but in a way, it kind of feels like a suspension, their own suspension, which was the reason why initially they didn't have him. They didn't tell him not to be on the practice field in rookie camp because the CFL says, well, he's allowed to practice, but it's up to your discretion, right? So they realized it was creating more of a story than it needed to be, because if you don't have him there, it lessens the impact or need to have to answer questions about it, right? Now, I'm sure it's not going to end, right? Reporters are still going to ask those questions, but at least there's a less of a focus on it with the players on the field now.
And an appearance of what is interpreted by season ticket holders, certain people in the media, certain people in the CFL, and other people who feel that this was not a good look for the Canadian Football League. I think that's what drove it. Unfortunately, the word discretion comes from the word discreet. The way this happened wasn't very discreet. They highlighted it more than anything.
No, exactly, right. And maybe they tried to be discreet. There's no way to be discreet about this, right? You're talking about the player that won the MOP last year. You're talking about the most important position on any football team, right? You can't be discreet about any of this. And I don't know if the Argos were hoping to be discreet about it. I don't know if the CFL thought that they were, levying a severe punishment to send a message. It didn't hit the way that I think the league or the team wanted it to.
I think only because they didn't do this from the beginning. I'm not here. I'm not here to pass judgment. I'm just being a reporter and reporting on the decisions that are made and trying to understand the fallout from it. The discreet thing would have been to say, "Listen, Chad, because there's levels here that haven't been achieved by Chad Kelly and the Toronto Argonauts. I don't hear any remorse. I hear that there's a definite problem. Something really happened that needs to be addressed. I'm not hearing any kind of apology from Chad Kelly. Do you think he owes anyone? I know he owes the person that has been hurt and has claimed to have been hurt, and also claimed to have lost a job because of it. I mean, obviously, that person deserves an apology, not necessarily for her not being able to work for the Argos until, I don't know if that can be proven that Chad had anything to do with not rehiring her. And I'm not sure even that the Argos can be accused of not hiring her because of this incident. The problem is the two situations exist. Whether they're connected is something to be determined in the future, whether it be in the next half hour or tomorrow, like happens whenever we do this So things happen after we discuss it. Like last week I said, well, you never know. Within an hour or a day, there could, and what happens in an hour? It happens. So essentially, what do you think? Like, is there more that Chad could do? And again, without passing judgment, just an opinion. What could is there anything more Chad could have done, and or the Argos?
Well, I think, I mean, yeah, Chad hasn't exactly, his social media behavior hasn't exactly put him in a great light. So I think that starts there. Just, he's blocked people on social media as well. I mean, obviously, he's well within his right. If he doesn't like something that's being said about him, he can block him. I'm not saying he shouldn't. I think the big one here is I don't expect him to give an apology to this coach yet, especially with litigation still going on. That likely will come once that's all resolved, whether it's a settlement or usually those cases end in settlement because the court system is just way too long to go through the whole thing. But I think that if there is an apology, it's to the Argos fans who feel betrayed, who feel embarrassed, right? Because their team is being dragged through the mud right now. Their fandom is being dragged through the mud. Also to his teammates. Like this,
Absolutely.
right? Teammates and organization. He's created an issue right now that really shouldn't be present during when you're coming through training camp, right? The focus should be, as the Argo said, the players on the field. Unfortunately, that can't happen when your star quarterback has put you in a position that you have to be reactive constantly, right? And in a way, you should apologize to Pinball Clemens because let's just say you could tell that this is not a great situation for Pinball to be a part of. He's taken a lot of heat for some of the things he said, but I truly believe when he says he didn't know about the incident, right? The conflict, whatever you want to call it. And we know Pinball. We know his character. We know how he is. We know what he's done and the work he has put in. What really strikes me about all this is Chad has done a lot of work himself within the community, charitable, through different programs that MLSC has. And like that's going to be a tough road for him to come back. Yes, he laid some good groundwork, but that goodwill, in my opinion, isn't there anymore. When you have an incident like this, when you go through a situation like this that puts such a negative spin on a franchise that frankly can't afford to have it, right? There's a
Absolutely.
fine line that you have to walk as the leader of the team, right? You cannot put your team in a position like this. And we know about his past. We know what he has done in the past. That people will always look back on that too and say, has he really changed? We knew what he was like in the past, and he's still getting himself in trouble.
That's on Pinball. That Pinball can't. The why Pinball is I think why he's so upset is that he. I said this last week, so I won't go into too painful detail. He made a decision to bring in a guy who had a history of things that aren't very conducive to pro football. You know, for the social side of pro football and how players and teams and the league are in the fabric of our Canadian society, right? Whether it be nationally as the CFL, promotes, or regionally, where every team lives, and locally, where teams play. It's not a good look, and what he's done is he's made Pinball's life. He's hurt a lot of people by making the decision, because it's a decision he made. And I'll say this: that I'm not going to say everyone, but I'm going to say I've made mistakes where I've reacted to an encounter with somebody. I'm not saying that I did something wrong, but what I am saying is I may have reacted improperly. Like, you get tied up on the internet and you do things, or you don't do things that you're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's out there. David, everybody can judge, right? Whatever he laid out there after this situation is a commentary on how he feels he needs to speak to the situation. The need that he didn't have was to say that he if he did something wrong, there was a qualified way to say it. To say if he did something wrong, he apologizes. I don't believe any of that happened. And most importantly, is that you know he's in a position where people look up to him, and he didn't understand that he should have done that. Now, am I here to say he should? No, but I do have an opinion that it might have been an idea. The problem becomes, in the middle of your conversation, you were talking about him, and I'm getting this impression of, later he might apologize. Somehow apologies while you're standing on the carpet, when you're when you when you're facing people and you're standing on the carpet, an apology at that point, it doesn't have the same kind of power an apology has that isn't apparently forced on you. And I don't like that. Like those kinds of apologies, I'm not a big fan of. Only because at least they lack the impression of sincerity. And there's a lot of sincerity that's in question here. The sincerity of the Argos on whether they protect all their employees, the sincerity of Pinball in looking after this situation, the sincerity of as I said earlier with Chad Owens, and the sincerity of football in the Canadian Football League, that they are a word that they like to use, inclusive. This does not speak to inclusivity. It speaks to bias. And whether it's true or not, I'm not here to say there is bias on the Canadian Football League's part. But what I am saying, that from the Canadian Football League right down to the deepest root of the people who run the Canadian Football League and are part of the Football League, this looks like a lack of sincerity, and it looks like a lack of inclusion, because for there to be inclusion, it must go hand in hand with protection. And there was a lack of protection in this situation, which has become abundantly clear and has stained everybody involved in this from the ground up.
Not only that, it's just put people in very brutal situations that they don't want to be in.
Well,
right?
Yeah. Well,
The players who have had to answer questions about all this, be a part of the reporting, getting questioned about things that were said that they probably wouldn't even want to repeat. Well, what they've seen, right? Like they don't want to be a part of this, right?
we have proof of that. We have proof of that. The
Yeah.
CFL has a report that says there was a player that witnessed some commentary who refuses to support it publicly.
Yeah, who did not want to participate in the investigation.
Yes.
Which I don't know if it was a former Argos player or current Argos player. In my opinion, personally, if I was the Argos, I would have told every single player, you are cooperating with this investigation.
And if it appears they don't, that's like not saying it, right? Because that's everything here. Everything in this situation gravitates to the worst possible scenario. It's just because of what it is. We're going to keep looking for the floor. Where's the floor? Where's the floor? While the team and the league try to find a way of giving the perception of a ceiling as opposed to a floor, right? What we're trying to achieve. And I don't doubt the sincerity of Pinball Clemens, the Toronto Argonauts, the Canadian Football League, that they don't believe this is right, what happened. They're just having trouble. And I can't see it, I can't see an excuse or an accusation or a blame about it, because, but for the grace of God walk I. I don't know what it really is like to be in that situation. So in this particular situation, we all have our own experiences, but
yeah, we've never been in this situation before. And as I said last week, right, on the bonus show we did, my bonus show, not your bonus show, the Argos are following people who are experts in this field. They have attorneys. they have HR people are going to advise them whether the steps they're taking are the correct ones. And I'm sure maybe one of those people said, you know what, probably not the best idea to have Chad at practice, right? Those are the people you rely on in this situation, not the football people, not the people who are on the field or making decisions from a player personnel standing, but people from an HR perspective. That's the benefit of the Argos being under the MLSD umbrella, is that they should be getting proper advisement, which is why I am very curious as to why there wasn't more. Again, as I was saying, there's been a lot of reactive situations to all this. How hasn't somebody from MLSC not told the Argos, you know what? Don't have Chad anywhere near the field for a couple reasons. One, the distraction, and obviously the message is sort of sent. But two, what's the best way to diffuse reporters? Right? You don't give reporters a chance to video Chad Kelly running around, albeit yes, street clothes, but being there talking with quarterbacks, being involved in everything. I know it might, for some fans, and they might question why exactly should that be such an issue. It's the optics. Optics mean a lot in these sort of situations. When if this lawsuit goes to court, right, and all the allegations get put forward, the lawyer is going to also say, well, has MLSC taken this matter very seriously? Because look, the player was on the field, the player was at practice, right? They could say they're sorry about the situation, but then to have Chad there, the message it kind of sends, right? It's all about optics, in my opinion. And this is why I was struggling to figure out why would MLSC put the Argos in that position? Like, and don't tell me, and some people say, well, MLSC doesn't care about the Argos. MLSC cares about their image. Whether it's the Argos, whether there's TFC, whether it's the Leafs or Raptors, it's still MLSC in some way, shape, or form.
Well, they haven't talked about it, and I can say, from somebody important in the Argos, that what I will say is that there's a serious look at what Chad Kelly does from now on, and as far as his training and what he does to ensure that he has an understanding and learns what he did wrong and how to improve. I know that MLSC, the Argos, are putting that forward, and I know they've got him in a situation where he needs to learn about what he did wrong, and then they're going to be the first ones to know or get an opportunity to see how remorseful he is. Because at the end of the day, remorse, saying you're sorry doesn't mean anything if you're not remorseful.
Yes.
And it's like an apology, right? Unless you know what you did wrong, apologizing is not exactly then there's a step before apologizing and then expecting to be forgiven. So, all right, well, you can have the last comment in this. I say we just see what happens, and
Yeah.
hopefully the football isn't interrupted as much as it has been right now, and it dies down to the point where we can talk about what we're here for, and that is to talk about the Canadian Football League and football in general.
No, exactly, right? I think right now the best thing for the Argos is to not distance themselves from Chad Kelly. He's still part of the organization. We all talked about why they can't just cut the guy loose, but they should do their best to make everybody else understand how serious they're taking the situation. And even if they made the wrong choice, own up to it and just move forward and do what's best moving forward.
Absolutely. All right. So the cuts have begun. You want to talk about any?
Cuts have begun just even before the players get onto the field. The Tiger Cats have really been through the ringer the last few weeks. This wasn't a cut per se, but Ted Laurent basically announced his retirement after 12 seasons. Solid veteran player for the Tiger Cats for a long time, and it just goes to show how another chink in the armor of this Tiger Cats defense that's already lost, Obviously Simone Lawrence, backbone of the team, Jordan Williams retiring in surprising fashion. And now I don't know who their starting linebackers will be. Like, to be honest with you, I don't really know. Like they made some decent additions in the offseason to the to defensive back. We had Jamal Peters and they added some guys from the Argos. But I'm very curious as to how this is all going to play out because there's a lot of question marks with this Tiger Cats. And, they went through the big change last offseason where now it's Scott Milanovic taking care of the stuff on the field. Orlando is purely on the front office part now. So I'm very curious as to how this is all going to shape out. Bo Levi Mitchell shows up to camp with a walking boot. Now, he did practice today, but the team also signed Taylor Powell to a contract extension. That's a team that's going to have quarterback questions. That's a team that's got quarterback questions all season long written right on them.
Let's just to refresh people's memory, if they're not aware, preseason started yesterday. That's the 12th of May. And a week from today, the 13th of May, Monday, while we're filming this, the preseason will start. So, we're a week away from football games, to put it simply. So now, having said that, the football games that are going to start are this is when they get a chance to see what they have in with players that didn't make the team last year. That's what's really going to happen here. It's going to be about recruitment and then seeing what they have, and so it'll be an interesting week to say the least. As far as the cuts that Hamilton made, they Laurent and they have released two guys, as with Simone included, who are central to the defense of the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the team. If this doesn't speak to a kind of deep change, this is going to be a different Hamilton Tiger Cat team, because the people who are going to be the lightning rods for reporters like you and I when we ask questions, we just lost two that were go-to guys, right? So the face of the Hamilton Tiger Cats is changing. And to your point, we don't know what that face will look like just yet. And that's basically what training camp opens up all the teams to see the kind of players that they have that have maybe practiced with the team, maybe played a game or two with the team, and begin to find out which of those players, other than the ones they bring in to be central, which ones of those will pop up to be more important for the fans and for those of us that enjoy watching the game. It's going to be interesting in Hamilton because it's going to be different, starting with the head coach.
It is. I think that's a team, that's a fan base that is looking for something different, right? Like I think they're tired of the constant question marks and, frankly, seeing the Argos finish first place the last few years, I think they finally want to see this team start to go in the right direction. Now, it's not that success like that comes with time and building things the right way, right? I think that they're doing their best given what they've already committed to. And I think that's the tough part there is they've committed to guys. Can't just simply walk away from players. This is not, I know that in some cases, yes, but in the CFL now, to acquire certain players, certain guarantees have been offered. Signing bonuses, partial guarantees on contracts. Unless teams are willing to completely eat and start at the very beginning, which that's not something a lot of front office people want to do. It's always easy to tear down. It's never easy to build it back up. So I can understand why Hamilton isn't making that push right away. At the same time, I felt like there was an opportunity the last few years to kind of rejig, rebuild, right? This Tiger Cats from within. They didn't really do it. They kind of hung around, and now Toronto, they still feel pretty confident about themselves. I spoke with Ryan Dinwiddie yesterday. He said it. He said it to me yesterday. Every team in the East got improved in some way, shape, or form. Ottawa's got another quarterback. They made some key additions, especially, they had added a Darius Pickett. That was a big pickup for them. Montreal, how can you not be confident in Montreal after what you accomplished last year when nobody thought you were going to win the Grey Cup? And then you have Hamilton here where it's like, yeah, they made some decent additions. They bolstered their defense. What about that offense? That's always going to be a big question mark for me with this Hamilton Tiger Cats team. What's the offense going to be like?
Yeah, the Hamilton Tiger Cats in recent memory were a dominant team in the Eastern Division and even in the Canadian Football League. They went from being very dominant for a few years to becoming a team that was fighting for second place, and now they have been passed by Montreal by winning the Grey Cup. So yeah, they've fallen alongside and just ahead of the Ottawa Red Blacks, and who the Ottawa Red Blacks are right now and the way they've been the past few years. So yeah, Hamilton they finally decided that they need a new culture. Talked about that, and now they've decided they need to bring some different players in. And they brought a coach in with a whole different look, and the team is going to have a different look. And you know what? It needs to have a different look, David. They have failed on so many levels, and now, in respect to their fans, a very dedicated fan base, one of the most dedicated fan bases there is in the Canadian Football League, and their disappointment, as much as I'm sure it bothers every Hamilton Tiger Cat fan that the Argos won a Grey Cup and, or like you mentioned, finished first ahead of them. I think the where the rubber hits the road is when Montreal wins the Grey Cup, and Hamilton, for the past 6-8 years has knocked on the door, but nobody wants to answer. So that's the tough part for the Ticats to build on. But I think, they have the kind of leadership that they can right their boat. You talk about the Argos and the players they've lost. They're now, I think, at least they're entertaining for the first half of the season. They're going to have a starting quarterback. They need to be dedicated to making the best quarterback he can be.
No, they definitely do, right? And that's going to be a challenge, right? We know that sometimes a quarterback is only as good as what's in front of him, right? How good is the offensive line? How good is the running game? Does he have symmetry with the receivers? There's so many variables. Sometimes quarterbacks get dumped on, right? They get the raw end of the deal when things aren't going right. We know it. We've seen it. We may have been a party to a few quarterbacks not liking what we've had to say, but we can only say what we see in front of us, right? And so I think that's where you really just need to, as an organization, put your team in the best position to succeed.
The Argos released Emmanuel Falola and defensive lineman Nelson Jordan. They also moved linebacker Mark Clements and wide receiver Jeff Badett and Aaron Parker to the retired list, and defensive lineman John Daka was moved to the suspended list. You want to talk about Saskatchewan? Are you hearing anything? Obviously, I think they're really excited about their head coach there. I know the players are, and I know also the fans are.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of pressure on the Roughriders, right? They make the coaching change. They make, but they still got a lot of the same ingredients from last year. Obviously, they had A.J. Ouellette. That was a big coup for them. I think Jeremy O'Day has the most pressure on him, I think, among all general managers in the CFL right now.
Yeah,
right.
and what Saskatchewan had before their new head coach came in, they had a team that didn't play as well as the lineup cards said they could have. Right, they've underachieved on a few levels. Right,
Yep.
At quarterback, they've underachieved because of injuries. Right, Trevor Harris is was on the shelf, and they had a merry-go-round of quarterbacks last year. So stability, I think, is the one thing that they're going to try and establish, and I don't see under Mace that it not being like that. So they're going to have to get some stability going. And the quarterback position, the bad news is that Trevor Harris was hurt, and so they brought in about the rest of the crew and give them all a shot. The good news is that this year they know pretty well what those guys can do, or at least they've done enough that they can build on it in the event that they got to pull somebody, out instead of Harris. At least they've got a head start to that.
Yeah, they already know that they have to. They already know that they have to be better at it. So,
Absolutely.
I look at I look at the Saskatchewan at this Saskatchewan team, and I think they're hoping that a culture change, right, with a new coach. Like some people say, "Oh, what's the coach really going to do? What's coaching really going to do?" Eh, I think it gets I think that gets underestimated a little bit. Just that ability to bring in a fresh perspective, maybe different ways to make the players accountable. That's one of the ways that I think Corey Mace will do it. Um, they do have one snafu on defense, and that's Jalen Edwards Cooper, who was one of their like top free agent acquisitions in the offseason. He wasn't there. he was at rookie camp, but he hasn't fully recovered from a dislocated shoulder that he had last year. We know those are tough injuries to really come back from, especially if you're a defensive player. Um, and this is a guy who's going to be replacing Nick Marshall, you know, who who's waived after he had some legal issues in Georgia. For those who don't remember, there's a lot going on with the Roughriders this past season.
They've also released him, and that makes him available to other teams and or to come back to
Yeah,
Saskatchewan.
if he's cleared if everything is all cleared and fine and Danny for him to come back.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a tough way to start your off season, your training camp without having a key guy there. But um, yeah, I just think that they have the Roughriders are just one of those. That's the team I'm most intrigued about in the West because they really need to start pushing forward. It's a very tough. I get it. The West is a tough division, but at some point you need to overcome it. You need to find a way to have that internal improvement. I think the Mace hiring was a smart, right decision, getting in a new, fresh perspective. I totally get it, but they're also counting on a rebound season, a healthy season from Harris, Roulette to help bring it, usher in a new running game. A lot of things that need to go right for the Rough Riders, but I like that they didn't just bring everything back. They didn't try to run it all back. I like that they were willing to make change. I feel like that was kind of a necessity after what happened last year, but that's a team that ultimately needs to do better.
Let's remember that sometimes, no matter how good a head coach is, sometimes their plan, their thinking, their system gets a little bit stale. And most of all, we hear about a different voice. Well, they've got a different voice, and they've got a guy with fresh ideas. That there's an automatic bump because of the coaching change that happens, where players feel they've got a fresh start, and that fresh start gives every player an opportunity to start over again. And you know what? I don't think there's a team that needs starting over more than the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They've had a tumultuous past few years. They've had a team that should have had a better fate. They didn't, but this is their opportunity to redo everything that's happened in the past. Let's move over to the BC Lions, and they released Isaiah Abraham and defensive back Justin Ford, and then defensive lineman Jonathan Turner. For them, for BC, they're a team that are on the cusp, and I think they still are, regardless of how well Saskatchewan improves and or Winnipeg maintains its power status. But like you said, this is a tough division.
It's a tough division, and if you look at BC, what's the one thing that's hanging over the heads right now? They're hosting the Grey Cup.
Yeah.
When a team is hosting the Grey Cup, the pressure gets inflated, right? We've seen it. I mean, when was the last a team that hosted the Grey Cup won the Grey Cup? And
Yeah,
even made it. I mean, Hamilton technically, right? But if I'm looking like even outside of Hamilton, I don't remember the last time really a team that hosted the Grey Cup won a Grey Cup.
Saskatchewan.
Was this Saskatchewan? That was a long time ago.
It was BC,
Right.
Toronto, then Saskatchewan, 3 years in a row, and it hasn't happened since.
Right. Right. So Toronto in 2012, like that was the one I was thinking of, and like that's tough. That's just a lot of pressure to put on a team, and so
Well, it's
I really
pressure all the way down the line. It starts with the ownership because they
yep.
accept the cup, and then now they got to put a team together. They want to make sure the pressure is handed down to the president, down to the general manager, down to the coach, down to the players, and all the way down to the water people. It's just it's a big deal. It's a big deal, and you know that BC, if there's a team that's ready for that challenge, they started that run of 3 teams that won at home
Yeah.
back in the day in 11, I guess it was. Yeah. In 2011. So, they're more than capable of doing it again.
Yeah, and like with BC, I didn't hate their off season. I know that they had to make some tough decisions, of how much they were going to run back. I thought that was a team that was going to be a lot better. That was going to be in the Grey Cup. It just, I mean, you run into Winnipeg every year, and it feels like you're doing like a pick your poison, right? I just also look at the additions they made. William Stanback comes in. They added some quarterback insurance with Jake Dolegala and Dakota Prukop back there. And also Ciante Evans. Like they made some big. Those are some big additions. It's just I'm very curious if they're able to pull that off, right? There's gonna be a lot of pressure on Vernon Adams. He had his good, he had his bad. They don't have
that under center. They have to have consistency.
Dominic Rhymes isn't back. That's a big blow to that offense, right? He was a very trustworthy receiver. So I'm very much curious if they're going to be able to reinvent themselves a little bit. And you know what? Can they just find that extra thing that they haven't been able to find, right?
And there's the Whitehead thing where he
and they also lost Matthew Betts. I should also say top defensive player too.
Absolutely, down to the NFL. He might reappear.
It's very possible.
But the point is, he's gone for now, and they have to plan on on him not being there. And the other thing is this, and this goes for every team. There's a lot more belief that the Canadian draft, the Canadian Football League draft, can yield you some players that can help bring you over the top. So we're going to see, these teams also have these draft picks they've made, and there's pressure on these draft picks because of the previous success. And BC made their share, and it'll be interesting. Their offense played better, but it's been BC's defense that, they got to come back with the same kind of defense. The strength that their defense was, if they can get their offense to move as well, then, this is a team that I would consider a real top-notch pick for the Grey Cup. And especially in this year where the excitement will be, BC the past few years since the new ownership came in, the excitement in the management offices has been so great. It's spilled down into the team, and we'll see if it can still continue to do that, because now it's nothing new. Now this is something they expect, the kind of support they get from the upper office of the team. So it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting year for them. But I think the key thing there is consistency under center.
Yeah, I think consistency under center, and take a little pressure off him if you can, right? Don't expect him to be the hero. Never works out well when you ask the quarterback to play the hero.
If the bonus is that he's in the position to win the game and does, that's great.
Yes.
But if you're expecting him to win the game, that could be a little more challenging because then you've got defenses that are ready to go. And football defense is a very important part of the game, and it's one of the only sports that gets a lot of the credit that they deserve. They might not get it all, but they get a lot of credit that they deserve. Defense is an important part, an important function of the game. It's basically what led BC to the greatness that they've had the past few years. uh, we'll go to the bottom feeder in the Eastern Division, the Ottawa Red Blacks, who have spent year after year after year, it seems. I can't even remember the last time they met, expectations. You have to go back a ways. This year, they'll have expectations again. And, the best thing that you can say about Ottawa, if they get a little help from a smaller injury group, especially a quarterback, this team has not had the opportunity to have success from the basic standpoint of a football team.
No, and just bad luck, right? And there's only so much to overcome as a team when you have to constantly battle against things that are not under your control. Now, you can do a better job of preparing yourself for that possibility, right? Not putting yourself in a position where you're relying on a quarterback who has never played in the CFL, barely has professional football experience to come in and be your starting quarterback because you lose your number one, you lose your number two. I think he was the third or fourth option. Like when I look at Ottawa, like Ottawa is the team for me that, other than Saskatchewan, I think they have the most. They have the most pressure on them to finally get out of that basement of the CFL. They've been down there for too long, and at some point, you just need to say, "All right, enough's enough." Uh, can we finally get ourselves in the right direction? We thought with Bob Dice, he was going to get them in that right direction. I think he's got to put a little more pressure on his players to step up. Right now,
Support him and support the
yeah,
team, and he's back again for another year. Long time, CFL coach now with more experience as a head coach, a very likable guy. The players like him. He's the kind of guy that does get the kind of respect you need. But it isn't endless. There's nothing wrong with being a good guy. But the fact is, every sport, it's production, right? What can you do to justify people walking through the turnstiles? And Ottawa has a lot to prove based on a lot of less than stellar seasons in the past few, at least, anyway. And this is an organization that they came into the Canadian Football League guns ablaze.
they did, and they support that. They give a lot of good work. They do a lot of good work there in Ottawa. The problem is, it's a tough sell being in Ottawa, just trying to, because that team has had so many struggles. They've never been seen as this juggernaut or top team in the East, right? Even when they won the Grey Cup all those years ago, they weren't viewed as a team that you thought could do it. So they have to kind of overcome that underdog mentality a little bit here.
Yeah, now it's worse because they have a history of failure, and
right.
Right.
I think the big thing is stability and improvement. You need to show some measure of stability and improvement as a club. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you need to go and win the East, but you need to show that you're at least better than Hamilton, that you can compete with Montreal, that you can compete with Toronto.
And they have to have somebody under center that can make it happen.
And this is healthy.
A regular refrain in the Canadian Football League. You brought Hamilton into the conversation when it comes to this team. That's two things these two teams have in common: searching for a quarterback. And these guys, will do their best to try and have, their quarterbacks prepared. But they have definitely all had the opportunity to know what they've got, depth wise. But now they need to figure out who's going to be in the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel I've always felt bad for Ottawa, But at the same time, it's a business, right? You can't feel sorry for a team if not doing their best to put themselves in a position to finally take that next step. Like for me, sympathy goes out the window at some point. You have to make the hard decision. You have to have that hard talk about, okay, what hasn't worked? What are we doing to fix it? Ottawa went and did that though. All right. Our quarterbacks haven't been able to stay healthy and we haven't gotten a good enough play out of their quarterbacks. Let's go and get an emerging talent in Drew Brown. Now, that's taking a big bet and a big gamble on an unproven player who hasn't never been a starting quarterback. But guess what? It's better than betting on, I hate to say it, but betting on a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy because, yes, bad luck, but it's also a history. It's
Yeah,
now
the
you
pattern.
it's a pattern that you can't be ignored.
Well, let's be clear though. They brought in also Tommy Condell. Is a quarterback whisperer, offensive whisperer. He knows Mazzoli, if he can stay healthy, and he understands the Canadian Football League, and he knows offense. So they've got a guy now that has a lot of experience in that, and he's had a successful offense in Hamilton, and he has the opportunity to. Sorry,
Someone misses you.
it's my mother.
Ah, yeah.
And this phone is terrible. You try to stop it from ringing, it won't stop ringing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rogers. No, just kidding. So basically, this team, I think it can rebound, and everybody's starting 0-0, right? Everybody's going to play their first game, and then this team, what it needs to stay away from is my buddy Owen. They can't be 0-2, 0-3, 0-4, 0-5, 0-6. They've got this team, Hamilton. Just because we spoke about them, and I didn't get a chance to say this, those are two teams that have to have a quick start along with Saskatchewan. I mean, every team needs a quick start, but nobody needs it more than those three teams as far as the ones we've talked about so far.
Yeah, I think you can't be behind the eight ball. Team. How many teams in the CFL can overcome? I mean, unless you're maybe Hamilton's the only one, in my opinion, that's been able to overcome those 0-5, 0-6 starts and get to the playoffs.
Yeah,
it just when you're behind the eight ball, it's just so much tougher to rebound.
Absolutely. Well, we only got a couple of minutes left. We'll pick up on the other teams moving into next week when we do the show. Any final comments? How do you feel about the season thus far? Any surprises so far with signings and/or what's going on in the league? Like anything, I haven't heard much about new rules.
No, that's the thing, right? There's just a lot of unknown. Like Winnipeg, I thought they were going to be in more trouble than they were. Yes, Jeff Coate retires, but you still got Willie Jefferson, you still got Dalton Schuin, you still got Zach Claros, and you still have. Why am I blanking on his name right now?
Jefferson.
No, Jefferson's still there. Canadian. Why am I blanking on Brady Oliveira?
Oh,
right? They still have Brady Oliveira. There was so much after that Grey Cup loss. There was so much talk about that this would be the last hurrah. That was it for that Winnipeg group. They were never going to be the same. Now, in some ways, they may not be. They brought back most of their guys, and I feel like that's an injection of confidence in that team, knowing we know we've been to the Grey Cup more than anybody else has in the last few years. Why can't we do it again?
And there's no reason why they can't. They have the players, they have the organization, and they're a team. I'm not saying needs a quick start, but they're a team that needs to establish itself as a continuing force in the league. We haven't really talked about the Argos in the game, and I'll just say in this 30 seconds, we'll talk more next time when we have more time. The biggest question, David, is what happens at quarterback and what kind of performance they get under center. That's my biggest question.
It will. It's always going. quarterback play is always going to dominate the conversation, no matter what team you're on. It's just the way it's just the way it always is in this league.
Absolutely. David, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
All right. He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Football Talk. You can catch this episode on Candid Frank Stanisci on YouTube at 10:30, and we hope to see you next time. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy your week. It's Monday. Mundane.